Tom is going to go live and we'll get started here.
Good. All right, here we go. 2, 1.
Well, welcome everybody to the December JAG meeting. Thank you all for coming. For those who came in person, it's great to see everybody in person. And for those on the screen, it's good to see you on the screen. I think we have solved some of our technology issues. I think everybody can hear, which is great, which is a step forward. So that is good. I do want to acknowledge somebody in the room. Sheila Poole, you're not in the room, you're on the screen, but we know this is going to be your last JAG meeting. And so we want to say thank you for your years of service, not only to the JAG, but also to New York State. You will be missed. Whoever will take your place will have some big shoes to fill. I don't know if they'll be able to fill them, but thank you for everything that you've done. And thank you for being a member of this committee and moving youth justice forward here in the state of New York.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you, everyone. It has been a privilege to do this work together for many years with all of you. So thank you all. Good to be with you today.
Yes, thank you. And with that, I guess we will do some introductions so we know who's in the room. We can start here in Albany, and we'll go around and we'll do New York City, and then finally we'll get the people on the screen here. So with that, I guess we will start to my right, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'm Diana Palmer. I am from Glens Falls, New York. I'm a councilwoman and a therapist in private practice. Nice to see everybody.
Good morning, I'm Nina Aladort. I'm a Deputy Commissioner at the New York State Office of Children and Family Services and oversee parts of the youth justice practice, including detention.
Hi, good morning, Michelle Diaz, she, her. To the JAG, I'm a youth member, but I do a lot of youth justice work, youth engagement, state, local, and across the country.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pita, and I'm the 2022 Empire State Fellow.
All right.
I'm Laura Gagan. I work here at Division of Criminal Justice Services, and I'm a manager in the grant unit.
I'm Meredith Ray Labatt. I'm the Deputy Director of our Division of Children and Family Services at the Office of Mental Health.
Good morning, I'm Alan Riley, Chairman of the State Commission of Corrections.
Good morning, Bob Macron, Deputy Commissioner and State Director of Probation here at DCJS.
Good morning, I'm Brenda Friedman, Family Court Judge and Youth Part Judge in Erie County, New York.
Hi, I'm Annette Harris. I'm a Deputy Commissioner for Administration and Staffing here at DCJS.
Hi, Tom Andriola, Chief of Policy and Implementation for the Office of Youth Justice.
And we have a table back here. I don't know if you guys can see them on camera, but we'll start over there with Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily DeTilio, Research Director in the Office of Justice Research and Performance.
Good morning, I'm Yvonne Turner. I'm the Director of Funding here at DCJS.
Good morning, Shalane Garcia, State Waterways Equity Coordinator in the Office of Youth Justice here at DCJS.
Hi everyone, I'm Giselle Lopez, Executive Director of the Youth Justice Institute.
Hi, I'm Courtney Murphy. I'm a Criminal Justice Program Specialist in the Office of Youth Justice.
And that is Albany, and we will go to New York City.
Hello, Lakeisha Hawley, DCJS, Criminal Justice Policy Analyst.
Latrina Buchanan, DCJS. That's it.
That's all we have here.
That's it here. Sorry.
All right. You guys are holding the fort down in New York. Appreciate you. And we'll go to our screen here. I think we will start off on the top row. We have Mark. I'll let you introduce yourself up there. You're on the top row on our screen here.
Hello, everyone. It's Mark White. I've done a lot of stuff.
It's almost like Prince. You don't need an introduction.
It's good to see everyone. I'm glad Tom hounded me for the quorum to get on today's meeting. And I do have to jump off in an hour because I got some hot stuff going on here, but I hope everybody has a great holiday season. To all of you. So, and I miss you folks. And I'm enjoying myself back in CT, so that's for sure.
Good seeing you, Mark.
Yeah, yes. Good seeing you, Mark.
definitely. And from there, we have Commissioner Poole.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy holidays to all. Sheila Poole, Commissioner at the Office of Children and Family Services.
Yeah. And Commissioner Rosado is next on my screen.
Good morning. Good to see you, Mark. And good to see you, Sheila. I'll just use this opportunity to thank you for your service and also to your support to DCJS and then and to me, especially over the last year. I'm very excited, for you in this kind of next chapter because I think it's good to have another chapter. But I know we're gonna miss you, and I just want to express my own gratitude for all that you've done.
All right, and Meg is the next on our screen here.
Morning, everyone. Megan Armstrong, Office of Youth Justice.
All right, and then I have Precious is next on my screen.
Hey, my name is Precious Lugo, and I'm a youth peer advocate for Olive Tree Family Services here in Buffalo, and I'm the youth voice on the Jags.
All right, thank you. And I have Nyasia.
Good morning. I am Nyasia Hamilton. I'm also a youth member on the JAG, and I'm a community organizer here in Buffalo.
All right, thank you. Buffalo's well represented today. Great. And I'm sorry, Trista, you last but not least. Screen's jumping around on me here.
It's okay. Good morning, everyone. Trista Deem, Chief of Criminal Justice Program Planning and Development in the Office of Youth Justice. I'm sorry I'm not there with you all in person, but I'm looking forward to it. Nice to see you all.
Yeah. And so that we will, can I get a motion for the approval of today's agenda?
I make a motion.
Second.
Okay, all right. Quickly. All right, and I will do the same thing with last meeting's minutes that were sent out to everybody. Can I get a motion for last meeting's minutes?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, all right, quick on the draw today. Cool. And so on the agenda here, we do have a presentation that Emily will be doing, but because we know that certain members have to leave and we want to make sure that we are able to vote on the proposals, we're going to kind of switch the funding proposals and updates with the juvenile justice data presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the federal funding status updates with Maura. You are now first, Maura. You are a shining star to kick us off here at the meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Good start here. Morning, everybody. So in your email, I'm just going to talk about the chart that we talk about at every JAG about the current funding available for the Title II award. Right now, we have every year from 2017 through 2021 open and available to us to fund. We got extensions on our over year money due to the sanctuary city litigation, so they're giving us some extra time to spend on the money. So you see there's a little bit of balance there in 17 and 18. We'll be working with our finance department to try to spend that down, hopefully with current commitments. And the chart is organized at the top. It'll show what money we have available to encumber or fund programs that you guys vote on here today. There's a state share balance, a local share balance, and below you'll see the current commitments, the Youth Justice Institute, the Youth Action Committee, the two proposals from the last meeting, the Equity Champions and Healing the Practitioner. And then we also have the recurring funding that the RED coordinator and the SCOC, the compliance monitoring work that's done every year. So that's all our current commitments. So you'll see that there's almost $6 million available.
All right, thank you, Maura. And with that, we have two funding proposals. I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you questions that I should know, I believe, but I'm just gonna ask because I can't remember. Can you tell me again about the difference between the local and the state? What does that mean, and what is the supplemental award?
Sure, those are good questions. So the state share is anything that DCJS spends money on. So, for example, the RED work and the compliance monitoring work would come out of the state share. Sometimes if you do an evaluation That would come out of the state share, because that's a product coming to the state. The local is all the money that we give, like the regional youth justice.
Okay.
That was all local money.
Thanks.
And then that supplemental award for $109,000, that in 2021, right? Or 2020? 2021 supplemental award. We got a little bit of money. We weren't in compliance with our SAG membership, and they gave us just 10% of the award or 1% of the award. And then they determined, or the OJJDP allowed us to access, they decided that the work that we've done to come into compliance with the SAG was good enough. We've shown a good faith effort. So they let us have that initial award and the 2020 award. It's unusual. I didn't think they would let us keep that 109,000, but they let us keep that 109,000 on top of the full 2020 award of 2.6 million.
Thank you.
So that's the reason for this. It's administrative nightmare for us to keep track of it too.
Did we fall out of compliance because of the pandemic or COVID?
No, it's the SAG. The SAG roster is we have to have certain members of, so many youth members, elected officials. It's always been hard for us because of how long it takes for the governor's office to make appointments. And so we had been out of compliance for 2 years or so, and I think we still are out of compliance, but OJJDP has just allowed us.
Okay. I was just asking because we had committee issues as well because of the pandemic. People had dropped off like unexpectedly on some things, so I was just curious.
No, ours is mostly how long it takes to get them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going through the appointment process.
I remember.
Plus, they added some required members when they did the Juvenile Justice Reform Act in 2018. So during that time period, we've been looking for the new categories and all that.
Gotcha. And they told us that we're in compliance for 2022 as well. Though they haven't given us our award letter, which usually comes at the end of September, so that's a little unusual, but I just reached out to our federal rep and she said they're working on the award letter for 2022. So that award amount will most likely change.
I just want to put something on the record. I think it would be nice to know what are the like these things that are happening. Like we have a big network on our own, and I know that most of the issue comes to the wait time getting in. But as we are planning to do the next year funding, because this has been an ongoing issue, how do we push harder for this?
As far as
like right now, what I'm thinking of, do we have people, or we're out of compliance for a couple of categories? Are they already in the governor's office?
Yes. So the category that we're out of compliance, and we do have somebody that's filled out the paperwork and is going through the process in the governor's office. Yes.
Okay.
But that is a good point, and part of it is right. Like you guys have filled out the package, right? Do we go out and ask everybody to fill out this 40-page packet? To say, well, maybe you'll be a member of the JAG or not. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do it.
Thanks.
Yes. Any other questions on the funding piece? All right.
Damon?
And with that, yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge Emily Tal and Precious Farrell.
Oh, okay. They're in New York City there?
Yes.
No problem. Thank you for attending.
Here.
And so with that, we will go to proposal number 1, which is a mentoring proposal, and I will turn it over to Megan Armstrong for that.
Thank you, Damon. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So the proposal that was submitted as part of the JAG materials for today's meeting includes funding of $550,000 total, which I'll explain that funding structure in just a moment. But it would support 5 separate mentoring programs across New York State. 3 of them are the previously funded mentoring sites, and we would bring on 2 new mentoring sites, one in the Capital Region and one in Long Island. So the funding structure of 550 is a 2-tier structure, with tier 1 being infrastructure support and funding of $50,000 for the Capital Region and Long Island as a new partner, to support efforts in marketing and matching with their one-on-one programming and other more infrastructure-like costs. Tier 2 would be a program expansion or enhancement, so something that the program would like to do and hasn't had the funding to do so or capacity to do so, or an opportunity that they would like to enhance. So this tier 2 would be for existing Big Brothers Big Sisters partners, which are the three that we previously funded: Westchester and Putnam, the Southern Adirondacks, and Erie Niagara, and the Southern Tier. Westchester and Putnam, if awarded this grant funding, is hoping to expand their Big Futures program in St. Mary's High School. They would like to hire a match engagement coordinator to mentor the entire family and not just the individuals.
Hey, Meg.
Hold on.
Meg, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot of background noise making it hard for us to hear you. Yeah, mute. It sounds like paper shuffling. It's paper shuffling.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So Westchester and Putnam, if awarded the $150,000 over the 2-year grant period, would like to support the expansion of their Big Futures program, which is career-oriented to sophomores in high school. They would also like to hire a match engagement coordinator, which would help mentor the entire family and not just the one-on-one matches that they're currently supporting. So instead of just checking in on how an event went with the bigs and the littles, they would support the siblings, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever else is living in the home with them. And finally, they would like to explore a new partnership with Department of Probation in New York City, as well as local law enforcement. It's a partner that they've struggled in the past to get, but they're hoping with this additional funding, they would be able to reach those bigs. Southern Adirondacks would like to create a group mentoring program to reach more kids, to focus on the higher needs kids. They're finding a lot of kids are coming to the program that have more mental health needs. So they'd like to also support the bigs that are paired or matched with the littles so that they can effectively work with them in the community, and also would provide a respite option. One of the needs their community has identified is the need for respite services in the county. So this group mentoring program would allow for some of that respite overflow as well. And finally, Erie, Niagara, and Southern Tier would also like to enhance their group mentoring program to include middle school and high school students. The Long Island and Capital Region teams, which are new, would support with $50,000 over the 2-year grant period, more infrastructure, planning, administration, matchmaking. We were very successful in the last round of quick spending with the 3 teams. We matched 75 kids, and there were 50 in the pipeline to be matched at school, which if you follow their Facebook page or LinkedIn page, has been a great success also. So the other neat thing that we're trying to implement with this program is, while these mentoring programs are mentoring, in terms of having a big and a little, we're also asking the 3 established mentoring partners to mentor the new mentoring programs. So we're asking the 3 existing current partners, Westchester, Putnam, Southern Adirondacks, and Erie, Niagara, and Southern Tier, to mentor the Capital Region and Long Island teams as they come in to this tiered structure, both fiscally, funding wise, and programmatically. So we introduced that programmatic template framework to this funding structure as well. When we met with the grants work group, we were asked to explicitly highlight the why, and why the investment, why the JAGs should support mentoring programs across New York State. So just to highlight some of the points that were made in the proposal, the mentoring programs do align directly on 3 different points in the JAG strategic plan. It allows OIJ to expand their mentoring footprint across New York State. You've heard me mention the work that we're also doing with the YJI and the mentoring dashboard, which is funded with a discretionary award through the federal government that Trista and I wrote for. That is in testing mode right now and will be launched next month in coordination with National Mentor Month. So be on the lookout for an email regarding that mentoring dashboard. Mentoring programs that we're supporting through the JAG funding is evidence-based. It targets underserved populations, and it's supported by a national affiliate and an OJJDP technical assistance provider, which means that the standard is high. This is not a backdoor mentoring program or something that's kind of operating on the streets. It's well supported through technical assistance training and standard measures. And also, the program represents a very nice geographic spread, which sometimes programmatically is a challenge for us. So by bringing in the capital region in Long Island, we can continue to cover more of New York State geographically. And finally, the Title II application that we apply for every year, submit every year, requires us to focus on prevention services and the need for building community trust. So mentoring programs, all 5 of these mentoring programs would help us achieve the prevention piece and the building community trust. So if it wasn't super explicit and clear in the JAG proposal, I just wanted to highlight those 7 or 8 reasons why these mentoring programs would be a good investment for the JAG. We also, again, just to reiterate, it was $550,000 over the 5 teams. Long Island Capital Region would receive $50,000 to spend over a 2-year period, and the 3 established mentoring partners would receive $150,000 over the same 2-year period. So we would have them going at the same time, longer time. This time it's not going to be a hurry up and rush and spend, so we don't leave money on the table. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Sheila?
Hi, Megan, thank you for your very thorough overview. I mean, this is always the question we ask, right, for JAG investments is sustainability, right? And sort of not creating cliffs for programs and staff layoffs and all those kinds of things. And particularly when it comes to mentoring, right? We're asking young people and families to engage in a relationship with people that we don't want to sort of, right, have to go away in 2 years. So I'm wondering what conversations, if any, as part of your discussions with these entities have really focused on that sustainability piece. So, you know, for example, you mentioned that one of the sites in particular is trying to serve an unmet need of young people with mental health issues. You know, just wondering if there couldn't be some conversations with OMH, right? Meredith and others at OMH. These are also the kinds of, I think, prevention programs that OMH may be interested in. But really my central question is about avoiding fiscal cliffs, you know, especially for a program like mentoring.
Yes. So yes, I mean, we're always happy to bring in state partners. These programs are things that we talk about at the PYJ meetings and other smaller meetings that we have throughout the month. But in terms of the training piece and sustainability piece, OJJDP funds Mentor New York, which is a training and technical assistance provider to a lot of the well-established mentoring programs across the state. So they also work with them on the back end to make sure that they're hitting their standards and they have what they need to, you know, deliver the training, as well as the national Big Brothers Big Sisters affiliate. So we've heard in that initial quick round of spending that the backlog of kids that need to be matched is their greatest need and priority right now. And once they're able to get them matched, it's easier for them to maintain that relationship. So their match lengths are very high. They're above the national standard because of how they are able to support the bigs and the littles. So between that and the training and technical assistance piece, and now the support from us and the support from each other, because we're trying to build in that mentoring, you know, component between sites, which they haven't always had. So I think between all of those things, the sustainability piece is something that we can work on.
Thank you.
And Nina has a question here.
So just sort of piggybacking on that, just something I would offer is when we set up our safe harbor funding, we had $3 million and we needed to reach the entire state with $3 million. And so what we created was sort of a step up, a plateau, and a step down funding. And we informed everybody that that was going to be our funding approach, and that they had to, in the years that we were stepping them up, plateauing, and then stepping them down, it was their responsibility. We didn't want to create the immediate cliff, so we sort of titrated them off their money dosage of 10 cents, right, to 1 cent. But it really helped with giving them time and the message right out of the gate that our expectation is that they would be figuring out how to do the sustainability piece so that they weren't just falling off the cliff. thinking about that as a strategy here, whether that's something to talk with them about, and just being really clear up front that the expectation is from the state that they maintain the same level of mentoring when the money goes away. And so being flexible enough to let them do some capacity building, whatever that needs to be at the agency level. It's very hard with these funding mechanisms, right, to build that in because we can't promise money forever. So it's just a suggestion. I think this is a great investment of money. Mentoring is really critical, but it's just a strategic funding approach.
Yeah.
Yes, Bob. Yep.
Go ahead, and then I can go.
Okay.
You first. You ready?
Megan, thank you for bringing this back to us. I spoke on behalf and in support of this mentoring program last time, I believe. I think this is a fantastic investment on the part of New York State, the JJAG. I think it's cost effective. Think about the level of services and the wide geographic area that we're serving for just $550,000. I would say it's a bargain from all the things I say. I do want to stress, though, and offer the opportunity to partner with this program on behalf of probation. Last week, our Juvenile Probation Operations Unit at DCJS met with the leadership of the Westchester County Probation in kicking off our second technical assistance intensive program initiative to improve outcomes, probation outcomes for juvenile practitioners in probation, and also reduce disparity in intakes and adjustments. So that program is really working. We kicked that off in Westchester County, and I brought up the Big Brother Big Sister, and they were not familiar with it, and I was surprised, and the bureau chief from Yonkers was there. And so, Megan, I want to make this offer to you that probation, I see that your wording is that, you're going to try to brainstorm, and I want to lessen the energy that you have to expend on brainstorming and offer you the olive branch here to reach out to our probation departments in Westchester, Long Island, and throughout the state to ensure that, we're partners. We strongly believe in mentoring. We're funding some mentoring through Raise the Age. I think that might also be a way to institutionalize some of these services through the Raise the Age plan. So it's a valid concern Commissioner Poole has raised. But when you're ready, please reach out to us because we would love to be partners in this.
Thank you, Bob.
I just made a note. I'll email you when we're ready.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I appreciate, Nina kind of highlighting the need for kind of planning and thoughtfulness about how to sustain these programs. I'm hoping that if programs are seeing, because, the interesting thing about Boys and Girls Clubs is kind of a universal intervention, right? It's at a primary prevention approach. So they may work with kids that end up being high needs, but they're kind of on the ground level doing it, with all kids, whether they have challenges or not. So when they experience or they encounter a child who has challenges, the question is, are they connected to the right systems and people who might be able to support them and help them? And so I hope that, I would encourage them certainly to talk to, if they're seeing an increased number of kids in their communities with mental health needs, to reach out to their departments of mental health, their counties, to let them know. I see it's highlighted here that participants often are Medicaid eligible. And if that's the case, the counties can help identify what services can be brought to bear for those children. They can also identify the services that are funded by the county through state aid dollars that might be able to be brought to bear to help these kids. And so they should be working collaboratively to figure out how they can, we don't want them to be burdened with mental health needs for kids. Like, that's not, in all honesty, that's not the job of Boys and Girls Clubs, and it shouldn't be by any stretch of the imagination. That's just too much. And so it should be, brought to the attention of the communities and to the professionals to help those children and to support their ability to remain engaged with the Boys and Girls Club successfully, because it's such a valuable resource to children to be engaged in mentoring programs, in addition to mental health services, right? So, we certainly want to foster those protective factors and develop, their assets and engage them with their communities in pro-social ways. like the Boys and Girls Clubs often do. So, and if they need mental health services to enable them to be successful and remain there, all the better. So definitely, they should be reaching out to the mental health departments to help them access services for those children. As an aside, we have started rolling out Youth Act, assertive community treatment throughout New York State. We only have 20 teams, but we're just starting. And Warren, Washington, Saratoga is one of them. So we're catching, it's not quite Glens Falls, but I don't think yet, but we're catching some rural areas and some of the areas that some of these programs are going to be in. So hopefully we'll have more services as we continue to grow resources.
Well, I just, the Southern Adirondack Big Brothers and Sisters is in the area where I live. And on the ground, I'll just say there's a big mental health provider shortage. We're a designated provider shortage area in New York State. So linking them to services with mental health professionals is good, but often they can't get in as often as they need. The availability isn't there. So this is a very good stopgap in between so that they still have someone checking in with them. So I think this fills a need that's really important in the area where I live. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a comment and question. So one, it's I know that during the last presentation they explained to us the pre-screening and as well, kind of like the percentage of, what systems have they touched or are in risk of touching. So I wanted to ask if I could get a refresher on it. And the reason why I'm asking that it's because at the end of the day, we are a juvenile justice funding group. Right, and I believe 100% in mentoring. I believe in the front door rather than the back door, but funds are limited. And although we might be sitting here with $5-6 million, I want to be more specific to is this mentoring really going to touch our youth in the youth justice system? That's question number one, right? Because I have seen as someone who has worked and still does community work. There's times where people cannot get into these programs because it's so general that they don't have more spots. Are we really putting our kids, the ones that we are supposed to be spending these dollars on, in these programs? More like a reflection as we're heading to our next 3-year planning, but really are we really targeting the community that we're here to serve? I know our kids, as someone who has been in the system and had crossed over multiple systems, I've seen it, but our priority is juvenile justice.
Meg, do you want to answer that with some of the programs that we're doing?
So in the proposal, the work that Erie, Niagara, and Southern Tier is highlighted explicitly focuses on youth that are at risk or currently system involved. So to answer your question, Michelle, yes. This is a population that they do work with very closely. In Westchester and Putnam, a lot of the kids have moms or dads that are currently incarcerated. So they're trying to navigate that path with them as well. So super long answer short, yes. These Big Brothers Big Sisters programs do focus on the youth justice population.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rosado, I see you have your hand up.
I didn't know how to take it down. Two quick questions. One is kind of the table and use for the strategic planning, because I think what Michelle just brought up is interesting, and I would ask us to kind of widen the view, right, in a strategic plan, that we don't just own these kids, but we actually own, kind of all the kids in New York State. I think that's important to have a conversation about. But my more specific question was about, someone was mentioning the Boys and Girls Club. I understood this to be Big Brothers and Big Sisters.
Oh, Big Sisters, sorry.
Yes, and I think there's a big
that was
difference.
my mistake.
And in the mentoring,
Big Brothers, Big Sisters, right.
There
I stuck on last week.
There are components of, of mental health, needs, and assessments that are appropriate in that mentoring relationship. So I just don't want to take it completely off the table. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Thank
No,
you, Commissioner.
thank you,
Yes, it
Commissioner.
is Big Brothers Big Sisters, not the Boys and Girls
Yeah.
Club, which are two
Yeah, that
separate
was my
distinct
mistake.
programs.
It came out, sorry. That was my mistake. It came out wrong.
And I think also part of the proposal, and to answer some of the sustainability, we're hoping that this mentoring piece from the other agencies to the agencies getting started will help build some of that infrastructure as well. Because I think that's a big piece of it, is that no need to reinvent the wheel, right? Like give you the money and then try to figure out like what's going on. If there's already been an agency that's been doing it, that's connected to OMH or connected to other systems or probation, they can help bring those partnerships together so those people don't have to figure out on their own, who to go look for and who are some of the partners that they could partner with. So I think that's part of when we thought about sustainability with this was, how can we get these other sites up and running and help them build some infrastructure? Well, there's some people that are already doing it that have been state partners before, and so let them mentor the newer programs that are coming into the fold here. And with that, I will ask for a motion. I'm sorry, somebody has their hand.
Does Sheila still have her hand up? She did. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sheila, you still have your hand up? Commissioner Poole, you still have your hand up?
Yes, but I'm with Commissioner Rosado. We're going to go offline and take a tutorial on how to lower our hands.
So I'll just ask you, both of you, every time we do something, if you still have the question or not. We'll just give you guys a standing ask for a question here.
The commissioners.
Yes, you guys have it.
David, thank you.
No problem. So
Make a motion.
I second.
Second. All right. And then, do we have yays?
Yays.
Yay. Okay. Any noes? Anybody abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like the proposal will go forward with all yays, no noes, and one abstaining. Perfect. Thank you. And with that, I will move on to proposal number 2. I think Shalane will be presenting proposal number 2, so I'll give the floor to you, Shalane.
I guess I should probably move to the hot seat.
Oh, yeah.
I guess so.
Just warm.
Good morning, everyone. So the second proposal that you have in front of you is entitled the Elevating Equity and Fostering Healing in the Youth Justice System Conference. So it's slightly different than the acts that Megan has presented in front of you. So one of the things that we wanted to sort of put in front of you is the fact that a lot of times there's tons of conferences that happen across the country that are sounding boards and places of learning and development that end up being cost prohibitive and time prohibitive for people in New York to attend. And there's not many that come this way. As we know, New York is quite expensive. So there's not many conferences that come this way that focus on equity, that focus on healing, and with the specific lens of focusing on the youth justice system. And so we really understand the value of understanding the work nationally, but we also want to make sure that we can explore the research and best practices that are happening here locally within the state of New York. This is something that we haven't really done before, so we're taking a shot at this. Other juvenile justice advisory groups have done similar conferences that have focused on equity, such as Kentucky, and we think that is something beneficial that we can do here in New York. So specifically, the conference is going to focus on ways that young people in their communities, as well as multidisciplinary stakeholders, can come together to foster individual and collective healing while also combating racial and ethnic disparities, which is a renewed commitment of the JAG from you all's 3-year strategic plan that you all just finished doing. And specifically, the conference is going to focus on innovative strategies and best practices in operating through an equity lens, how systems can foster individual and collective healing, the role that community, young people, and healing plays in addressing racial and ethnic disparities, and the business case for equity. As you can see in the proposal, we have some pointed deliverables that we hope to attain with this conference, including just pointing out the development of an ongoing learning collaborative for participants. Hopefully, in my thinking, building upon the racial and ethnic disparities dashboard that's already hosted at the YJI, but also developing an issue brief that's discussing equity and healing, which highlights the conference. As I mentioned, this is part of the JAG, this is related to the JAG committed renewed call to action to support state and local efforts to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities, as well as goal number 2, as you can see here, specifically the action items: number 1, addressing racial and ethnic disparities; number 2, focusing on trauma healing and behavioral health; and action item number 6, training and certifying youth serving professionals. 2 things that I'll add. One of the things that I understood, I had the opportunity to really attend and I was happy to see you there, Michelle, the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Conference in Kentucky. And one of the things that I really learned about that, there's so much information out there related to racial and ethnic disparities and healing that is not being spread across the field, number 1. The second thing that I found out is that when you do any type of reform or change, you need champions, right? But you have to have informed champions. And so the other part that I would say too is when I was at that conference, the OJJDP administrator, Liz Ryan, really made it clear that OJJDP was going to be shifting their focus to doing business that is more intentionally focused on reducing racial and ethnic disparities, promoting healing, and also being intentional about being trauma informed. So this is a conference that we hope that you all will approve, but it's also an opportunity for New York to really get ahead of the curve on that, as we know that that's moving nationally within the vision of OJJDP. So I'll just quickly kind of say that the ask is for $150,000 to host this conference, develop the learning collaborative, and also the publication of the issue brief.
Any questions?
Yes, I just had one question. So this is great. I love that you also have the role of the community, young people, and healing play in addressing the issue. In the key components of that, the money is going to go towards funding. I was just wondering, is it your plan also to include scholarships for young people or community members that would also benefit from attending the conference and representing the field? So
I hope the conference is free, right? I hope it's to keep the conference free, because as a state agency hosting the conference, we really can't charge for it. So that's the one thing. The other thing, in understanding the importance of being able to bring community members and youth to the table, you know, we would be willing to look at what it takes to assist with travel and things of that nature.
That would be great.
Okay. So I'm just thinking about the youth and community piece of this, and how to make sure that if we invest in this, we can also provide ongoing supports, right? So that it's not just a conference and people come and they learn things and then they go back to their communities and then the what's next? How do we? I think it's great. I mean, we've been talking about doing this for many years. So I think being really intentional about the planning around bringing those voices to be the center of the conversation, but then also figuring out how to make sure when they go back to the communities, we are supporting them in the ways that they need to be supported.
Yeah, so I think part of that is, one, with their presence being able to be in that ongoing learning collaborative, right? They'll have the ability to stay connected not only to us but to each other. So I think there's some natural support that'll take there. But also, if you notice in the recommended action, this also is considered sort of a launch to the Equity Champions program. So the hope is that those that come to the conference, if they're interested in really learning and taking that deep dive into becoming a champion for equity, that they'll be able to participate in the Equity Champion Certificate program that will launch just a few months later.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Commissioner Pugh. I actually
It's
have my
Emily.
hand raised, and I do have a question.
I was coming to you anyway, Commissioner Poole.
You were. I don't know if you gave up on me, Damon, and just didn't want to embarrass me anymore and ask me why my hand was back up. So I do. I love this idea. So, you know, one question is, you know, when I was reading this, I was thinking, well, my goodness, this also seems like a perfect fit or contribution to involve the Youth Justice Institute as sort of a co-creator, co-designer. So I'll just leave that there, because that's also part of why we created YJI. And then the only other comment I would make, and just implore everyone, is that the conference should be designed by young people. Right, and we, we have these conversations all the time, like, right, we are so still in government, like, great idea, and then we go about doing it ourselves, instead of making sure from the get-go that we do not get too far ahead without making sure that the planning committee, the steering committee for this conference is largely and by majority led by the voice of young people.
So I just want to say two things to that. Yes, the YJI is involved. So we did contact GISA, and we've begun those exploratory conversations on the YJI's role in this. The second thing that I will also say that in our thinking, even in just thinking in general, we realize that it's important to involve youth. So our intention was really to ask the JAG youth members if they wanted to partner along with us to plan this conference, but also hopefully elicit some of the help from the YJI's PAC members, which is their peer advisory council, to also help along with this conference.
Terrific, thank you.
Yes, and I know, Emily, you had a question.
Oh, I didn't really have a question. I was just sort of addressing Nina's concern when we met with the working group. There was, we said this isn't just a conference for conference sake. There has to be an action agenda, and it follows. It's a gathering place to get started, but that it wasn't going to just be a one-time event. So I just wanted to make sure that that was understood, that we discussed that in depth.
Yes, thank you.
Mark.
Mark?
I can get my hand. Yeah, we don't use WebEx here, so I'm struggling to.
Oh, come on, you were with
Well, if you recall, Damon, I struggled with WebEx, but thank God I had Damon to help me. But just piggybacking on what Emily said, I do just want to make sure we're emphasizing, right, this renewed call to action. And I feel like it's been renewed call during my 30-year career, and all the efforts fall short. And so I appreciate it's not a conference just to have a conference, but that's what it feels like to me, because nothing has changed. We've been doing this for a long time. So I would just say, if we do this, to really emphasize the call to action, because to me, it's just like when you talk about gun violence, right? We've been talking about it for 30 years, but nothing's changing. And so it's got to get to a place where we really got to think about what's sustainable and what is the actual action that's going to change this. And so I just ask that when you guys do it, that theme, is definitely pushed and well heard to the participants, that there's an expectation that something is going to be different as well as this conference. Which I think is a great idea, but and Trista remembers, right? I think Greg Owens did something like this at OCFS, and we always walked out of there well intended to move the needle, but at the end of the day, the efforts always fell short. So I just would ask that we definitely make sure we're going to make a difference by pulling this together, because that's what we want to see, right? Versus just bringing people together.
Can I ask a question? Is there like a targeted audience for this in particular? Like, for example, you want the regional youth juvenile task force leads to come, and then they're going to be charged to identifying, a race equity goal for the following year, or I don't know, based on the information and best practices that they've gleaned from the conference.
Nope. So if we go back to the proposal.
Thank you.
It's a multidisciplinary, outside of young people and communities, it's just multidisciplinary stakeholders such as law enforcement, probation, education, and mental health, all together, right? And so I think the pointed work comes from, again, the Equity Champions portion of it that has already been approved by the JAG, and then also within the ongoing learning collaborative. Trista, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that portion of it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I can jump in. So yeah, I think we have spent some time, first, a couple of things. One, when Shalane came back, and I'm just going to reiterate some of the things that Shalane said, but when she came back from Kentucky, we were really talking about how you know, and the JAG has talked about this for a long time too. How can we do something in New York, right? We always go outside. How can we do something locally? So one, figuring out how we can highlight some of the best practice work that is actually happening in New York State, because there are some counties and jurisdictions who are doing good work and their numbers, disparity numbers have gone down. We can highlight some of the county teams from the Policy Equity Academy who've implemented some strategies and practices, and we've seen some connection to their initiatives and the changes that they have implemented, and a reduction in disparity at adjustment in their county. I think we also wanted to take this opportunity to give people, particularly sort of frontline workers and other individuals who don't always have the opportunity to attend conferences, to attend ongoing learning, right? Typically, often what we see are people who are in higher up in positions to get access to things, right? And so we want to give that opportunity. The other thing we want to offer is to provide CEUs and CLUs, continuing learning credits, or whatever we're able to provide based upon the particular audience. So when we're looking at speakers, we want to be mindful of that, right? And what that looks like for ongoing education. Then that connection, like Shalane said, to the equity champions. We see this as a launching pad, right, for the equity champions. And then going back to sort of what's next for all of the participants. Not all the participants are going to get into equity champions, because that would be impossible for us to maintain. As you recall, that's a very longer process, right? But our hope is to create what we're calling an online learning collaborative. It might shift, it might look different, which is, we're kind of modeling it after sort of the framework that was in the UB Trauma Champions Collaborative, and how that framework went about. So we can keep, and again, we're still talking with the YJI, because we partner with them in all things. I think everything we say in partnership with the YJI, right, is what could that look like? Isn't it an expansion of their already microsite? Is it this other ongoing sort of connection or platform that's hosted on their website, which we can remind people? We will have folks have some sort of call to action and work plan, but really putting people back to this ongoing process. And what we've learned with the race equity work, I think the Policy Equity Academy is a good example of this. It's the training and what's next, right? So we are going to push people to what's next, and we're going to use that online learning collaborative space to be able to help folks get there. But we also have to have this understanding that we're not going to get a commitment from everybody who attends the conference. But if we can start planting seeds and continue to move the work forward as we're expanding what the next iteration of the Policy Equity Academy looks like, can we create toolkits to expand it in other counties and jurisdictions? All of these things are part of the ongoing conversation about how we're ensuring that we are not just talking, but that we are moving from talk to action.
Yeah.
Trista?
Yes?
Trista, Precious has a question.
Okay.
Hi, this is Precious. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I listened to your response just now, but while I'm looking at the proposal, it says that the conference will focus on ways that young people and their communities can pretty much get involved to combat racial and ethnic disparities, but I didn't hear mention of having any youth there. So granted, this is for people in like higher positions and stuff, but we can't have the conversation about what can be done to change things without involving youth in that setting as well, because we won't really know what it is that they need from us to change in their community. So I think that if possible, we should try and open it to them as well, so they can be in attendance.
Yeah, Precious. I don't know if you couldn't hear Shalane as well, but Shalane did mention that when she talked about who would be in attendance. We said youth, communities, and then cross system. I don't know. I'm getting a ton of feedback, so I don't know if anybody else is. Look, I'm hearing a wind tunnel. Is it just me?
Everybody has to mute because there's so much background noise.
I am muted.
So, Precious, just going back to what, and this was a little bit ago in the conversation, Shalane had mentioned that in addition to youth and families, when someone asked who the target audience for attending, it would be youth, families, community member, in addition to multidisciplinary stakeholders at the system level. So yes, the intent would always be to open it up for attendance for people to be a part of that process. In addition to, we youth, we've taken the feedback and our hopes to have youth be a part of the planning process. Our hope was also to have an entirely youth-led, youth-driven panel as a plenary, I think, on the second day.
Okay, that was just my question. So with that being said, what's the plan to like get the youth involved? Like, are we going into schools? Are we like blasting it to agencies and stuff for them to get youth involved? How are we gonna go about that?
So, Precious, I think you're signing yourself up to be a part of the planning committee. Because I think those are all things as a part of implementation, right? We try and get as much information and put as much thought forward about what we hope and what we think it could look like, but also understanding that we need feedback and input from other people. So, those things haven't necessarily been decided yet. I think, like Shalane had mentioned earlier, our hope would throw it out to any of our youth JAG members who would want to be a part of the planning process, and then also work with the YJI and the PAC, which is comprised of, if you don't know what that is comprised of youth members.
Okay, and one last question. What like area in New York is it gonna be open to for the youth? Is it like the entire state? Are we focusing on certain counties and cities, or?
No, the hope is for it to be open to everyone within New York State who wants to come. Like I mentioned before, our hope is to, if there is an issue with someone attending, if there's an identified issue, we hope to be able to assist them with travel or anything like that so that they can be a part of the conference.
Might cost more than $150,000 if we're going to do that.
Yeah, that's what
maybe we want to build in like travel stick, something like, is that for everything? That's just the planning and the venue. But if you say it's going to be free to everyone, we might want to think about increasing the budget.
And even if you see it in the
I think we should move this to a planning meeting, Damon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do want to, go back to like what worries me this is the funding. 150, it's too little to what we're just talking here. Or what is the purpose? And I did wanted to ask, right? Because I'm going through the proposal and that it's open, that it will be paid, not just the conference, but the states. And here it says what it's going to be used for. Meeting space, keynote speaker, commercial. There's nothing with the stuff that we talk about or that we're bringing in. So I don't think it's clear to me. I feel like we're talking that this is the goal, but like the way we're seeing it is two different things. And whether it's through the note or this has to be modified.
The proposal that we put in front of you is based upon what we have right now and what we know, right? So we talked about this in the grants working group, that we can't put forth a full entire proposal if we don't know if it's going to be approved. That's not sustainable on our end. So what we have here, and even in the proposed funding amount, there's a pretty significant cushion that we built in there. Because of what we know, we built our budget, our proposed initial budget based upon OPS and their conference. Based upon the meeting space and all of that stuff, even looking at this particular budget, there's still almost a $25,000 cushion for those things that have come up in this meeting today and whatever will come forward. We are certainly happy if you want to give us more money, but the reality is, based upon what we know, what it would cost, based upon meeting space and all of those things, this had a cushion in there for that.
The reason why I'm saying this, because back in 2017, 2018, part of CJJ, since I've been there a long time, I did a youth conference, and New York State JJAG approved $150,000 to just send youth there. And out of 150 youth, they were only able to cover 425 youth. Right, so I want to put that there, and that's back before inflation and anything else. So 20,000 to me, it's pretty much nothing what we're talking right now.
So I think just that's to send people to CJJ, right? We're talking about youth within the state of New York, ideally, so there wouldn't be that much of a travel cost when you really think about it. If you're talking about traveling within the state of New York. Mm-hmm. To send people to Washington, D.C., absolutely. You have to cover hotel and all of those kind of things. So because I don't want to belabor the point, we're certainly happy to ask for more money, or if the JAG says 150 is not enough, we're going to give you 250. hey, I will write it down and say record it for the notes. So it's whatever I think the pleasure of the JAG.
Is there a way to get like a commitment and understanding that this conference will include funding for youth and families in need for travel and they're going to be in attendance, and if at some point it exceeds 150, we'll either approve that or they can come back here or whatever it may be. But for the purposes of this, understanding that that's the add-on, we can approve the proposal, as discussed today. Can we do that? Is that feasible?
I think it would be better if we put a motion with what we have now, but ask the team who's planning this to not come with a full proposal, but like a full, like how is it going to be and how is it going to be spent on, and during our next meeting, and if, so you can get like a better average of are you missing or not. So that will give me more peace.
Yeah.
So can I, sorry.
Yeah.
Before I sort of like really out of what we're talking, but something like a big point, kind of like the 3-year planning is, youth engagement. I think it's, I don't even know how to say it because like I'm really emotional right now. I'm going to be just really blunt and brutally honest with you guys. We're talking, DCJS reached out to the Youth Justice to plan this in collaboration to bring youth members, but the JAG in itself has youth members and they have never been reached out. So I want to put that out there for thought to all of you. I am pissed at that.
So I think, so one of the things that I will also say that I do believe we have a young person that sits on the grants working group. I do believe that. The second thing I will say is the proposal, we've been asked to come to the table with proposals to you all. This proposal is just that. It's a proposal, right? We've mentioned that in the planning process that our intent was to fold in young people like yourself if you had the availability to come join us, and also the YJI's PAC people, right? So I don't think our intent has ever been to leave anybody out or leave the young people out. But what we also have, and if we're having an honest conversation here, is the fact that sometimes it's hard to get young people to come alongside us to do that, respective of everyone else's outside commitments and things of that nature. So I think sometimes we have to move forward and then say, young people, come to the table as we're moving this and planning this for the future to get it to its final place to be put on. Young people, come alongside us with that. So I don't want you to feel slighted in that, but what I want you to understand is that we always have you all in mind, but sometimes it's hard to get you all to the table.
I think it's all about communication, and really to go back to a little bit of what Nina said, it's, there's a big difference between being youth-led, youth-informed, and youth-center, right? Like that's one of the things that I want to also bring as what we are. Mm-hmm. I know I opt out. I'm not saying that I was not included. I'm saying that this is, could have been just, how can I ask to be there if I never know what's going on? 2 things, right? One thing that I learned with CJJ is, so they have the youth conference and they have regular conferences. One thing that I love about the youth conference is that it's led, it's centered, and it's informed. So they make it. How can I really give you feedback when you only get me to the final stages? That does not make any sense. When we say what we mean, we have to be part of it, whether it's communicating, can you be part of this? If I cannot commit, then yes, go ahead and move on.
Yeah, so I get you. I think the last thing I'll mention though is that, you guys were given some funding in the Youth Advisory Committee, the YAC. I don't know if we ever changed what that acronym actually stood for, to be able to do these things. And I would encourage you all to be able to utilize that funding, right? There was $75,000 set aside for those things, for you all to have that youth-led, youth-informed sort of events or projects or programs or anything that you all wanted to do. But we want you all at the table. So unfortunately, but we have to propose something first. So we want you all at the table. We want you part of this planning process. I think that's why we were intentional in mentioning that we would do, plan alongside the YJI's PAC and you all as youth members here on the JAG. I just don't want that to get lost, that we understand the importance of this being youth-focused and youth-driven. It can't all necessarily be youth-driven, but as far as the planning and everything is concerned, we welcome that.
And so with that, so we don't, go deep into this, because this is definitely a good discussion that we need to have and really figure out a mechanism how to involve young people earlier in the process here. But I do want to take a motion on how we're feeling about at least this proposal here.
So Damon, I want to make a motion to support this proposal subject to the establishment of a planning committee that is inclusive and contemplates the needs of youth and also contemplates the need for some sustainability and a structure so our investment will be realized in the years forward. That's the motion.
If we vote on this, is it $150,000, or if they want more money, they're coming back to ask for, can we put a cap on what they can have?
No, we haven't put a cap on what they can have.
Well, can I just jump
So
in
do I
real
get a
quick?
second?
Sure.
It's the up to amount. So there is a cap right now. It's up to 150,000 with the exception, right?
Right.
That if we find we need more money, then we could come back and ask for more money.
Yes. Yeah, but there's no cap on how much more.
Well, I mean, they can't come back and say, I need $400,000, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a big.
Then we say no.
Yeah, I guess I don't want them to plan something and then we come back and say, no, we can't give you that much money. That's what I was kind of getting at.
Right. But no, you guys haven't decided that there's a cap of 500,000 or anything like that.
Okay.
Like, we know.
Right now it's up to
Yeah,
150,000.
But if we come in the planning committee and find out we need more, we will come back to the group and say, we need X amount of dollars. And it'd be up to you guys to decide, like, does that make sense? Does that work?
Yeah.
But from what I'm hearing is that you guys would be in favor of, if we needed some more money, it sounds like you guys would be in favor of.
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to include a proviso that the applicant can come back to the JJAG and request additional funding based on that need. That's the motion.
All right. And can I get somebody to second?
Can you write that down, please?
You'll second the motion? All right, fine. And do we have all yeses?
Yeah.
Yes. Abstain.
Abstain?
I'm gonna abstain.
Abstain? Do we have? How about in New York City? Because it's hard for me to see there.
Okay, you guys are on.
Naisha abstain as well.
Okay, Naisha abstained.
New York City, you guys want to vote?
I voted yes.
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 Yes,
Okay.
New York
Yes,
City.
here.
Yep. And how about the commissioners? I see a thumbs up, Sheila. You're getting better. Yes. And Commissioner Rosado?
She gave the thumbs
Oh,
up.
thumbs up. I'm sorry. Yep. So it sounds like we do. Yeah, we do have enough yeses to move the proposal forward.
Somebody's speaking.
Someone's speaking. Is that New York City?
Yeah, is that New York City?
Yeah,
Yes.
Precious had
Precious.
a question.
Can I make a suggestion or ask a question about it?
Sure. Yep.
So being that we have up to 150K until we talk about it in planning and come back and decide if we need more, I would suggest trying to get a discount or maybe like free CLEs and CEUs, because the cost of those per person can come out to be a lot of money.
Yep.
So since we're doing it with like a more positive outcome for the conference, I would suggest trying to look into that, because I know sometimes they can cost up to like $75 per person alone.
Yeah. Precious, you are all in the planning committee. The more you keep talking, the more you're not going to be able to escape the planning committee here. So,
All right, I'll be
thank you.
quiet.
And so it seems like we do have enough yeses to move this forward. So thank you to everybody for that. And with that, we will be moving on to Emily. Is your show from here on with the juvenile justice presentation here?
Yeah, it's right on the PowerPoint. You can just share it.
I can't read this.
I think we're gonna share it on this.
You're just not trying hard.
Oh my God. I'm gonna need to get the cheaters out.
So we are not meeting to share this Excel document. Let's see if we can get the PowerPoint up. There it is. All right.
Stop.
Here we go.
Can we
You do
take
it's up?
out?
Okay, we're good.
Can we get rid of the faces?
Yeah, that's fine.
Not that we don't love the faces.
Yeah, just I don't know. I don't even know the name of it.
The window with the people.
Yes.
Full name. Can we minimize the window with the people? Okay.
You know what's crazy? So I've been in the U.S. now about 13 years, half of my life.
I can drag it down. Maybe Tom can drag it down.
Let's see.
For about 3 years.
Ooh, all right, here we go.
All right.
Oh, wait, but it's not gone there.
And in that type of period, I learned how to
Maybe it has to come from,
write and speak
let me find the
English.
guy.
But even as of now, I still have
Maybe it has to
difficulty with like fruits and colors.
That's totally normal. My grandmother came over.
Oh, I can go up there. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, because it's up there.
Okay. Is it at the podium?
I think so, yeah, let me check.
No, everyone is whispering, we can hear you.
She was 104.
Oh, wow.
She was not so compos mentos after 101. Every so often, she would have to reach for a word in German because she just couldn't bring it. It's totally normal. It's her first language.
Yes.
There we go.
Just so you guys know, you all are mic'd and we can hear all your side conversations here in New York. I'm just letting you know. Okay, thanks.
We hope you're enjoying them.
Pretty insightful. Thank you.
It's on you, Emily.
All right.
I think we've got it working now.
It looks great. So, should we wait for the other members to come back?
You can take it.
We can go ahead and get
Okay, all
started.
right.
Yep.
So just want to introduce myself. I'm Emily DiTilio from the Office of Justice Research. And I am new to the juvenile justice data world. I've been with DCJS for about 10 years, but been overseeing the youth justice team for a little bit over a year. And this is probably my first in-person meeting with the JJAG, but I've been watching you guys kind of through the pandemic remote, on the WebEx, and I can say that this is definitely much better. So just a little bit of background here. So today we're going to be sharing a presentation that's a little different than what you all have seen before. We're going to be sharing a lot of data related to raise the age and court case processing related to raise the age, especially specific to 16 and 17-year-olds who are arrested for felonies. And we're going to be sharing data from the youth part, from probation, from the family court, and also sharing some analyses that we've done looking at case processing pre and post raise the age implementation as we really start to try to gauge the impact that the law has had on these youth, specifically, the 16 and 17-year-olds who start up in the youth part when they're arrested for a felony. And then lastly, we're going to be sharing some data related to the felony firearm arrest, which is certainly something that it just, it's in the media. There's a lot of interest around firearm crime. So to be able to share some data that shows the felony firearms with respect to these 16 and 17-year-olds and just how it's playing out. So a really quick summary of raise the age. I'm embarrassed to even have to do this for this group. You guys do not need this introduction. But since raise the age implementation, the 16 and 17-year-olds, they're arrested for misdemeanors. They go straight to family court and their cases are processed under the JD procedures. The 16 and 17-year-olds who are arrested for felonies, the law established the youth part of the criminal court, and with the presumption that many of these cases are going to be removed to the family court system. So unless there is a motion and the DA tries to keep the case up in the youth part due to some exceptional circumstances. And then another, big tenet of raise the age is that we removed these children from the adult jails and prisons. So this is just a little visual depiction of the case flow of Raise the Age. You see, I'm going to try to get my laser pointer up here. You see the dark blue represents the youth part of the criminal court, and so a felony 16 or 17 year old arrested for a felony could start up in youth part. Their case could be resolved in youth part. It could result in the conviction or the YO adjudication, or it could result in a dismissal or some other outcome. Or the case could be removed to probation intake, as depicted by this yellow box on the screen. At probation, the case could be adjusted, and then which diverts the case totally from the system, or could be referred to the presentment agency that determines if a family court petition is going to be filed. And then at petition, they can either get the JD finding or the dismissal. So I do just want to talk about the youth part data that or not just the youth part data, but kind of all the youth justice data that we have available to us. So with the youth part arrests, we get that information from the computerized criminal history database. 16 and 17-year-olds arrested for as an adolescent offender. We also get the 13 to 15-year-old felony juvenile offender arrest. So those are the 13 to 15-year-olds who are arrested for certain JO crimes. And that comes from the computerized criminal history database that DCJS maintains.
Looks like New York City's not seeing the screen for some reason.
Oh, they're not? Okay.
Is everybody else on WebEx seeing the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep.
Do you want to unshare and then share again, maybe?
Right.
Yeah, they have the presentation. Right?
We have the.
Yeah, they do. It's pretty small is the issue is.
Should we try again?
Yeah, try again. Share, just share that, yeah. Okay.
All right. They may still not be able to see it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they have. They have the.
We can't. It's fine.
Okay, so maybe I'll tell you what number slide we're on here. So we're on number 4, and we have the youth part data, felony arrest for 16 and 17-year-olds from the computerized criminal history database. We also have probation intakes from a data system called Caseload Explorer. That's information that's entered and maintained by probation departments across the state. We have that at a case level, a very detailed level from 2019 forward, thanks to a lot of work by OPCA and researchers before me. We also have the family court petitions data from OCA, which is, we receive it pursuant to an MOU that we have here at DCJS with OCA to be able to analyze that family court petition information. And we have that from 2002 forward. So a lot of the data that I'm going to be sharing today, pretty much all of the data I'm going to be sharing today, is coming from these 3 sources. All right, so we'll jump right in here. So this graph shows the adolescent offender arrests. These are the 16 and 17-year-old felony arrests. We're on slide 6 for those of you who cannot see. But these are the 16 and 17-year-old felony arrests by quarter since 2019. And as you can see, at full implementation of Raise the Age, you see the red line is New York City, the blue line is outside New York City. We see a pretty big jump in these arrests. And then they come down quite a bit when the pandemic hit. And then really since the first quarter of 2021, we are seeing them kind of steadily increase each quarter. And then we see a similar trend outside New York City, which is the blue line. And you see with full implementation, these arrests, they jump up when the 17-year-olds are phased in, and then they increase. What we were really seeing in the last 6 quarters is that these arrests have been increasing. and they're getting closer to the pre-pandemic levels. So in New York City, you'll see they're still under the pre-pandemic levels. Outside New York City, they've surpassed those pre-pandemic levels. This graph shows the AO arraignments. Similar trend, big jump after the full implementation of Raise the Age. They kind of come down, and then really since the beginning of 2021, these AO arraignments have been increasing each quarter. And you see in New York City, they're just about at the pre-pandemic levels, and then outside New York City, they've surpassed the pre-pandemic levels.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
about why there's a difference between the number of arrests and arraignments that's as big as it is? Is it because?
Sure. So in New York City, they have a lot of cases that are declined to prosecute. So you may.
On the AO side.
Yes, correct. And I'll share some data that shows you how much, you know, what that looks like.
Can you explain the New York on pause? What does that mean?
Yeah, so New York on pause was when the pandemic hit in March 2020. And so we just put that in there kind of as a guideline because we were seeing, you know, the pandemic hit, you know, the criminal justice system, just so many things changed. And so we put that on there just kind of as a point of reference so people can see like, okay, why was there such a huge decrease?
Thank you.
So this table here shows the adolescent offender arraignment charges. So this first part here shows New York City, and then outside New York City. For those who are in New York City right now, we're on slide 8. And you can see in New York City, you have 33% of these charges are robbery, and then 16% are assault. So you know, what we are seeing is that the charges really differ by region. You have 13% of the charges are robbery outside New York City. So also there's more assault in New York City. I'll say that the charges outside New York City are a little bit more distributed, right? We see more charges for burglary, more charges for other offenses related to theft, more charges for criminal mischief. And in the city where it's like 50% assault and robbery charges. So a little bit of a difference there. And I will say in the looking at adult data, it's not that different than what you see. It's just different charges that you see New York City rest of state. All right, so this slide shows the 16 and 17-year-old outcomes in the youth part of criminal court. And the main takeaway here from this slide is that the majority of these cases are removed from the from youth part. So 91% of these cases. So we look down here, and for those of you in New York City, we're on slide 9. You can see that 91% of these arraignments in New York City are removed. These felony arraignments in New York City are removed to the family court process. And then 84% outside New York City are removed to the family court process. And this is looking at 2019 through June of 2021. So we're looking at 3.5 years of implementation data here. And just looking at the number of convictions that are occurring in the youth part, we have 258 total for that 3.5 year period in New York City, and then 413 outside New York City. So 5% of the cases in New York City are resulting in a conviction or the YO adjudication, and then 10% are outside New York City are getting the YO adjudication or the conviction. And then looking down here, just looking at the number of cases that are resulting in confinement. So in New York City, of the 258 convictions and adjudications, you have 100, which is about 40% of the cases resulting in confinement of a year or more. And then that's about the same outside New York City. You have about 40% of the kids are the cases resulting in confinement. And then we also have a number of cases that are getting confinement with of less than a year, and then confinement of less than a year and probation. And then just statewide, the probation, just straight probation supervision is about 20 to 31%. But I do just want to point out that this 258 and the 413, it's a pretty small proportion of the total cases that are being arraigned in youth part. So many of these cases are being removed is really the main takeaway here. So that's what case processing has looked like in youth part, and most of those cases are getting removed straight to probation. And so we're going to take a look at the JD probation intakes that we get from the probation data that we receive. All right, so this chart here, we have New York City here on the left and outside New York City on the right. It shows JD probation intakes since 2012, so looking at the last 10 years. And you can see in New York City that these probation intakes for the 7 to 15-year-olds, the blue portion down here is the 7 to 15-year-olds, the orange portion are the 16 to 17-year-olds. You see these probation intakes coming down quite a bit prior to raise the age. And in 2019, they spike up quite a bit because the 16 and 17-year-olds are phased in, and are now being sent to probation. And then in 2020, 2021, we see those numbers come down. I mean, a lot of numbers came down during the pandemic, but really the main takeaway here with the probation intakes in both regions of the state is that we were at 2017 levels in 2021. So we were at the levels prior to raise the age in 2021, just because we saw that pretty big decrease. So while we have seen a pretty big decrease in the intakes, looking so far this year, we looked at the first 6 months of 2021 versus the first 6 months of 2022. And you can see in New York City that the intakes are up about 50%. And then outside New York City, they are up at 44%. So the intakes are on track to increase in 2022. So when we show you this graph, this chart next year, we'll probably be, I'm not sure exactly where we'll be, but maybe closer to the 2019 levels in 2022. And then at probation, when the child gets to probation, we look at how many cases are being successfully adjusted, how many are referred to the presentment agency. And if we just focus here on the 16 and 17-year-olds, you'll see in New York City, you have just under 30%, 28% of the probation intakes are being adjusted, successfully adjusted, and then just over, sure, sorry.
What is
the presentment agency?
Yes.
So my understanding of the presentment agency is that they are kind of like the child district attorney, the district attorney for child.
Prosecutor.
Yeah, okay.
So those are county attorneys.
The county attorneys.
The prosecutor.
Okay, so they go back. But what does that mean? I'm sorry, I'm still don't get it.
The prosecutor?
Yeah. What does that mean in this case? Prefer to.
So it's a good question. So when the case is at probation, it can be the probation could successfully adjust it, which totally diverts it from the system. It just goes away. And then if it's referred to the presentment agency, which is the prosecutor will make a determination if they will file a family court petition. So and they could also make the determination there that they're not going to file the family court petition.
Thank you.
Do we think that those numbers are so different because of the higher rate of declination to prosecute at the beginning? I mean, those are stark differences, and we've seen that for years, actually, the difference in adjustment rates in New York City and the rest of state, successful adjustment rates.
We don't get the data from the presentment agency, which is Corporation Counsel in New York City. We don't get that, but what we have heard kind of anecdotally in the field is that many cases get referred to the presentment agency, but they don't, but then they decline to prosecute there. And so we do see that. We see when we look at the ratio of kids who are referred to presentment and show up at petition, it's very different in New York City. And outside New York City, it's actually a lot closer. So we do think there is a lot of decline to prosecute happening in the city.
But their adjustment rate is much higher.
So it's much higher outside New York, right? Yeah, it's 50%.
High outside of New York for the 16 and 17-year-olds. Do we have any sense of what's behind that?
Yeah, there's two things. Keep in mind that probation doesn't have statutory authority to adjust all cases. There's two things that affect adjustment. One is eligibility, and a whole lot of cases in New York City are not eligible for adjustment given the seriousness of the offense. So one is eligibility. The second is suitability, and that's controlled by Section 205.22 of the Uniform Court Rules. Considerations that impact suitability for adjustment. And while you look at these cases, in New York City, you'll see 32%, non-New York City, 43%. Those are of the eligible and suitable cases that they're adjusting. That's of all cases that they're adjusting. But if you took into consideration those that are not eligible, the adjustment rate of eligibles is probably 80%, 85%. So of the cases, of the universe of cases that come through the door that are eligible for adjustment, probation adjusts in excess of 80% across the state. There's some disparity between New York City and outside the state. So it's a little misleading when you look at this because the inference is probation has exclusive authority, a statutory authority over all these cases. It does not.
It looks like Trista raised her hand. Yeah.
Sorry, I accidentally hit the space bar. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm now in the fault of the tech stuff. I accidentally hit space bar.
So could we get that additional analysis of what was, what the denominator really is about what was able to be, what was suitable and
what's eligible and what's not eligible? That would be helpful.
Yeah, because that will give us a clearer picture. Because without that denominator, it doesn't tell the right story.
It would be work for the researchers to do in terms of
looking
at all the arrests and determining which are eligible for diversion and which are not. Yeah.
I actually do have my hand raised now on purpose. Sorry, I did raise my hand on purpose. So, can we get some sense of that based upon the immediately referred category? I mean, it's not perfect, right? But can we get some sense if they're immediately referred, then they don't meet either the eligibility or the suitability, correct?
Yeah, you can kind of get some sense of that. I don't know if we have the exact data that would be able to speak to eligible and suitable, but we'll certainly look into it.
Yeah, keep in mind too, on the removals, and Judge, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the removals, there are certain cases where judges are going to refer those directly to family court for petition, given the seriousness of the offense. And so probation will not see those cases. So those are going directly to family court. There's still an opportunity, through the process. It used to be up through fact finding, and now with the provisions and the changing of statute effective 12/19/19, judges can refer those back to probation for adjustment if that's the decision of the court. So there's we've expanded statutorily the opportunity to refer additional cases back to adjustment. But keep in mind that on the most serious cases, while they're not staying up in youth part, the proviso is that they're removed, but they're removed for petition purposes.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll move on here to the next section, which is the JD family court petitions. So we looked at what's happening in youth part. We looked at what's happening at probation. If the case is referred to petition and if there is a petition filed, we just want to take a look at those trends. So this similar chart shows the JD petitions filed since 2012. You can see that that just like the probation intakes, these had been coming down quite a bit prior to Raise the Age. They jump up with Raise the Age implementation, and then they come down when the pandemic hit. And so what we were seeing at the end of last year is that the petitions were very close to the 2017 and 2018 levels that we had seen prior to Raise the Age. And you can see just the proportion here, like this is the proportion that we're looking at of the 16 and 17-year-olds. Last year it was, in New York City, it was 66%, and it was under 50% outside New York City. And then just like the probation intakes, the petitions are on track to increase in 2022. Looking at the first 6 months in both regions, they're up 21% this year, and up 26% outside New York City. So up 21% in the city, up 26% outside New York City. So we can expect to see an increase. And then at petition, the case could result in the JD finding, which I call it the negative outcome. People could certainly correct me if I'm using the wrong terminology, but it's a JD finding, which is the negative outcome, and or it could result in some other positive outcome or non-favorable or favorable outcome, which is the ACD and the other favorable. So looking just at the 16 and 17-year-olds, the number of them that are receiving a JD finding is about 40% in New York City, about 40% outside New York City. So 4 in 10 of the cases are resulting in the JD finding. And then about 60% in each region are receiving a favorable outcome at family court.
I just have to, we've had this conversation many, many times. These are really upsetting numbers. 50% of all children live in New York City, in the state of New York. And to see that there were almost 900 kids placed on JDs outside of New York City versus 200 in New York City of the younger kids. I mean, that's almost 1,000 kids placed on JDs outside of New York City, right? And then the same for 176 JDs that were placed versus 487. What is going on in the rest of state that people are so frequently placing kids on JDs? This is a really problematic number that we've had this discussion before, that if New York City can do it, the rest of the state can do it. And it's just...
I have a comment. I don't think that these numbers represent individual youth because, for example, when I have a youth, they might have multiple petitions. So they might get one disposition on one, and then they might get ACDs on the others. So I think when we're looking at these numbers, they're talking about cases, but they're not necessarily talking about youth.
But that's true in New York City too, honestly, Judge, right? There are kids who have multiple. So, I mean, I think that that's still apples to apples, but this has always been a dynamic that we have seen, and to see it again so starkly, I think we really need to keep lifting this question up about what is it that's going on that would cause that huge differential.
But then when you look at, I guess what I'm saying is then look at the ACDs, because in New York City, you've got 343, and outside you've got 1,300. Yeah. You know, look at the conditional discharges, you've got triple the number. Look at probation, you've got double plus the number. So I think that's why I'm saying when you're looking at these numbers, you got to be careful that you're comparing what you're comparing.
Right, but I think even the fact that so many of them are going to all the way through the process, right? The numbers raise a question, that's all for me, about why are there almost 7,000 petitions for kids 12 to 15 outside of New York City, and there's only 1,900 in New York City that go that penetrate that far, right? It just really raises a question about either resources or attitudes or race, right? Practice. It just I don't know what it means, but it's a story that's troubling. And I think, Commissioner Rosado said, look at race, and I think that's, and maybe even gender, right?
Yep.
I'd also like to know what the arrest numbers are, because what are you comparing it to? Because if law enforcement isn't arresting in some jurisdictions, then of course you're going to have fewer filings. So I think we have to understand the whole context, not just the filings.
Yeah, absolutely true. And let me say a couple of things. One is, if you look at the JD percent, the 16 and 17-year-old percent of JD petitions, they're approaching 50%. They're greater than 50% in New York City. And I was talking to a director the other day that they're 65%. 16 and 17-year-olds, so 65% of JD work. Now, in spite of that, probation is increased their adjustment of these more difficult cases that are coming from the youth part and being removed. They've increased 10 percentage points on their adjustments, which is pretty dramatic given the complexity of the cases that the judge sees every day, and multi-need cases, including mental illness, et cetera. So keep that in mind. You look at placement, no one wants to see kids in placement, but if you go and look at the charges of the kids in placement, judges are placing kids charged with some pretty serious offenses being held in, and we've done this analysis from time to time. Race certainly plays into it. I think two things I'll say. One is one of the reasons that the Office of Youth Justice conducted the Policy Equity Academy. Buffalo was one such county participating. And then the second is our work in OPCA funding the Juvenile Probation Operations Unit. Now we've done Onondaga, we're going into Westchester, next we'll be in Buffalo, working with the probation department, mapping all of their systems, looking at opportunities to reduce disparate impact. So we're aware of the data, we're aware of the disparities, we're doing our best to try to address that. But I will say the cases, and I just read 2 critical incidents yesterday from Albany County, very, very serious charges that are coming through the courts.
Yes, and just with all due respect, we're seeing a lot of criminal mischief. Kids come in who are very young, who are multi-system involved, whose issues are not criminogenic, and they're coming in on really low-level charges because there aren't other available options for them. So we're seeing both, right? We're seeing an increase in both our detention and our placement facilities of young people who, before the pandemic and before Raise the Age, we had really stopped seeing them come in, that we had really that message about detention is not a place to get mental health services or permanency services, right? We're seeing some slippage back to some old, there's a lot of, I think, new judges, I think there's a lot of new people in the system who don't know the history and all the work that we did for many years to really create some firewalls for the youngest kids with significant mental health or trauma histories from using detention or even OCFS placement as a system that can't say no, right, versus other more appropriate services. So yes, there are lots of kids coming in as there always have been, but we're seeing the lighter end increase at the same time. So I just think we need to keep our eye on that collectively.
I have a question, Nina. When you're talking about charges, are you looking at the plea or are you looking at all charges in the past? How are you?
When I see the charges, it's the top charge that comes into detention in particular.
The top charge they were charged with?
That's what's always on the remand order is the top charge, right? And I'm seeing, criminal mischief 3, a lot of crime 3. I saw it on OGA, which I haven't seen in years, honestly, a secure detention remand on an OGA, obstruction of government administration. It's just, which means they
Nina, I can only tell you that I don't have
I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just saying that this is.
I'm trying to be helpful, but I can only tell you that I'm knowledgeable, particularly about the Westchester facility. And I continue to look at that because probation runs it. And, you know, they have a capacity, they used to have a capacity of 24. I think they have a capacity of 20. They used to have a capacity of 32. I think they have a capacity of 24 now. Last time we looked at it, 18 of those youth were charged with murder. There are some pretty serious cases. Judges are not, in my experience, detaining youth for minor offenses in New York State.
But again, with all due respect, you're only looking at one. I see all of them, right? I see across the system. And I'm not saying that it's masses. I'm just saying I'm seeing an uptick in our system of the use of detention for very young kids, 11-year-olds, for running away, for being trafficked, the kinds of things that we work really hard collectively on to stop, and we were very successful, but we're starting to see some of those, that knowledge got lost, right? There's been turnover everywhere. So I just want us to not lose our vigilance around that. Yes, almost all of our kids who are in detention are in as AOs, frankly, and JOs, but those small number of kids that come through as JDs, they are not all in on serious felony charges. So the numbers are smaller because the beds available are less, right? Because there's so many JOs and AOs, but I just want us to all be aware as we keep thinking about where our pain points are, that we just have to stay vigilant and keep that conversation going. Sorry, I took up too much time.
No problem. I think that this is what this is supposed to do. It's supposed to drive the presentation, and the data is supposed to drive the conversation. So, yes.
I don't know. This is a little bit difficult, but I just wanted to ask, is there a possibility where like we could actually also not just see the numbers of like the total, but like see the numbers of people that go through the system?
Let me put that in my parking lot and think about it a little bit.
It sounds hard, I know, but you know, so.
Well, it's kind of a good segue. So we're going to look at juvenile delinquency and racial and ethnic disparity. And these are charts that I think this group has seen in the past. Something has seen similar charts. And so this graphic here shows the racial and ethnic breakdown of the population, and then each of the case processing points that we have in the youth justice system. And this is New York City in 2021. So you can see in our first bar right over here, we're looking at the total population in New York City aged 12 to 17. So the youth population 12 to 17 in the city. And the racial breakdown. So 24% were reported as Black, 36% Hispanic, 26% white, and then 14% other. And then here we're looking at all the different, these 7 bars here show the different case process points. So I know this is a little bit hard to see, but hopefully the color scheme tells the story here. But you'll see that there's, especially in New York City with the Black population and the white population, there's just massive disproportionality between how the kids are represented within the system compared to how they're represented in the general population. So while in New York City, 24% of the children are Black, you have between 50 and 65% of the kids at each of these case process points are Black. And then while the white population is 26% in the city, only 4% of the kids of the intakes opened are white kids. Only 1% of the JD findings in family court so the non-favorable findings in family court are white children. So just huge disparities when we're looking especially at the Black and white population. The Black population is very overrepresented in the city. I'm sure this is nothing new to this group. the white population is overrepresented in the youth justice system. Looking at the Hispanic Latino community, you have it doesn't look as disparate, right? You have 36% of the population is Hispanic, and then if you look at each of the different case processing points, it's closer than when we're looking at the white and black population. So they're between, I'm just looking here, 30 to 35% at each youth justice, I'll say, case process point. Outside New York City, and if people in New York City are still with us, we're on slide 20. It looks a lot different. The population outside New York City looks a lot different. You have 67% of the population are white, 16% Hispanic, and 11% Black. So just looking here, even though the kids outside New York City are only 11% of the total population, they're making up between 30 and almost 50% of the cases at each process point. And then even though the white children outside the city are 67% of the youth population, they're making up between less than half at each case process point. So just like New York City, we see huge disparities with the Black and white population, and then with the Hispanic and Latino population, 16% of the kids are Hispanic, and then just like New York City, it looks less disparate, right? How the kids are represented in the system looks closer to how they're represented in the general population.
Can I just interrupt you to say that that's not
Sure.
apples and apples. That's still a very high number, right? That is to say that almost as many kids as are reflected in the population are reflected in the system. That's not a positive. That's a negative as far as the Latino community is concerned, in my view.
The percentage.
Yeah, so it's if you look at the just how the white population is 67%, but they are less than half at each point in the system. So here, when we're measuring the racial disparities, I mean, it's not good that any kids are in the system at all. It's just we're looking proportionally at how they're represented in the system versus how they're represented in the general population.
Do we know, I don't know if Heather could make it today, but do we know the other race ethnicity, how many of them identify as Native American?
It's a pretty small, I know this just kind of from doing other work, looking at the race data, but it's in New York City, it's more Asian. And then outside New York City, it's also Asian, but it's a pretty small proportion are Native American.
Thank you.
I don't know the exact number. All right, so we're going to move on here to our second to last section.
Emily,
yes.
I do want to say that I think it's important that for the first time, several years ago, DCJS made a substantial commitment to actually putting this data on the website. We never had this, and the reason that we didn't have it is we never had case-specific data. We had aggregate data. And so with Raise the Age, we made changes to the Caseload Explorer. And every month, we download from each of the 58 probation departments and the city of New York through something called CE Sync, a data set that's delivered to DCJS for analysis, case specific. That's really important because now we know what's occurring with respect to race and ethnicity at each of the juncture points through the system. And further, DCJS is sending this data to the probation directors each 6 months for analysis. So this is what we're working on, is looking at your data, and we're training probation directors in concert. There's great disparity in the system. There's no question about that. But now, you can't, it's difficult to address unless you have data. to frankly, to show people where they can see the disparity from general population through final disposition. And of course, there's a whole sequence of events that occur from arrest through final disposition, placement, sentence, intake, adjustment, et cetera. So just to keep that in mind, we need the data in order to make an impact on this.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, I would be happy to do a demo of our website and show everyone the race ethnicity data that we post up there. We've definitely expanded it so much in the last few years. It would be great for, I think, everyone to be kind of just aware of what's available. All right, so this next section, we were going to take a look at some analyses that we developed looking at the impact of Raise the Age on outcomes of 16 and 17-year-old felony cases in the court system. So looking at court data pre and post Raise the Age implementation. And I'll talk a little bit about our methodology. So to summarize, we compared outcomes of 16 and 17-year-old youth pre, post, and then and during Raise the Age implementation. There was this kind of the 2018 and 2019 implementation dates for the 16 and 17-year-olds made things a little bit complicated because there wasn't just one kind of date when Raise the Age was implemented. So we kind of looked at everybody and we said, if you were a 16 or 17-year-old youth and you were arrested on a felony between 2016 and the second quarter of 2022, you are going to be in our analysis cohort. And we went and we looked at three specific things. We looked at the to what extent is Raise the Age diverting kids, these felony cases, from the criminal system, and the youth part is still part of the criminal system. It's the youth part of the criminal court system. And so to what extent that are we diverting kids? And we know that Raise the Age was designed to do that. So we know that's happening. We also looked at to what extent are outcomes changing, so favorable versus non-favorable outcomes. Are kids getting more favorable outcomes, or a higher proportion of kids getting favorable outcomes since Raise the Age compared to prior to Raise the Age? And then we also took a look at incarcerative outcomes. Prior to Raise the Age, were we being more incarcerative than we are now? So trying to gauge the impact specifically on the court case outcomes that the law has had. So this first chart here, we'll focus on New York City. And for those of you who are in New York City, we're on slide 23. What we're looking at here, if we look at this first chart on the left, you see the red portion are outcomes in adult criminal court or youth part, and we're kind of looking at arrest outcomes for every year from 2016 to 2022. So the red is the outcomes in the adult criminal court or youth part. The purple are those that are removed to probation intake, and the green are those that are removed to family court, and then the blue are declined to prosecute. So Nina, this was your question. You can see those about 10% of the cases are declined to prosecute.
Super helpful.
So you can see in 2016 and 2017, looking at these 16-year-old felony arrests, 16 and 17-year-old felony arrests, you have 90% of the cases are being resolved in the adult criminal court, which makes sense. There was no law to divert them from there. And then about 10 or 11% were DA declined to prosecute. As we move into the years, you can see in 2019, the removals to probation intake start to occur. The green here, looking at the removals to family court from youth part, start to occur. And we see this red here, this proportion that are being resolved in the criminal court system decline a lot. So it goes from 90% in 2016 and 2017 down to 24% last year, down to 17% so far this year. So more kids, we're certainly diverting these kids from the system, and here we're trying to put some numbers to that, right? Outside New York City, you have 100% of the kids were in. We don't get the same DA decline to prosecute disposition data that we in New York City. But so to us, it looks like 100% of these cases are resolved in criminal court. Makes sense. As we moved into 2019, 2020, 2021, you see the purple removes to probation show up. You see the removals to family court show up. And then then those that are resolved in the criminal court system come down quite a bit. So in 2021, it was 34%, 24% so far this year. So most felonies are just now being diverted from the criminal system. We did the same analysis looking at 16 and 17-year-olds arrested for felonies and looking at their non-favorable versus a favorable outcome. So here, if we focus on New York City, once again, you see the green here is a conviction or a YO adjudication. The red is a non-criminal violation, and the blue is a JD finding, and then the blank is a favorable outcome. So you can see in New York City in 2016 and 2017, we have a third of these cases are resulting in a conviction or adjudication in the city. And then you see that green really start to shrink. And so far in 2021, it was at 15%. In 2022 was 11% were receiving a conviction or adjudication. And this is looking at all the youth. So whether you're an AO or you're not an AO and you were being phased in. So this is looking at everybody. We're not limiting to any kind of raise the age classification. And so if we look at the green and the red and the blue, that's all non-favorable. So we see those non-favorables coming down quite a bit, right? You can really see that curve. And at the same time, you see the total favorables increasing. So 50% of the cases in New York City resulted in a favorable outcome. Fast forward to 2021 and the first half of 2022, we're at 75%, almost 75%. So 3/4 are receiving a favorable outcome.
Do we know, I know case processing, particularly for the more serious cases in the youth part, is really long, right? And shorter in some parts of the state and longer in other parts. So the N for each is number of cases that had concluded in that year, right? Not what those started, but those that there was a disposition.
Yes, correct. Okay. So it's the number of cases that were resolved in the year.
Do we know, and this is, you may know this off the top of your head, whether the numbers are comparable to, like, if the number of cases that resolved are comparable, or if the numbers go, I mean, obviously in 2020, the numbers went way down because there were no criminal trials, right?
I can show you that we have appendices in this with the numbers.
Okay, great, then I'll look there.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Here, and then I saw that little thing at the bottom. Thank you.
Could you also define what favorable means?
Sure. So a favorable outcome is just any, like, it could be a dismissal, it could be the DA declined to prosecute, it could be an ACD that resulted in the dismissal, it could be it's just a non-conviction outcome or non-YO adjudication. So or a non-finding. So if there was no JD finding, that would also be in the favorable pool.
Okay, but if there's a JD finding and an ACD, that's considered non-favorable?
That would be, well, you mean in the same case?
Yes.
I'd have to check.
Because that's mostly what we do in our county. So that's why I want to understand what these categories mean.
Okay, well, we can look and see kind of how we are doing it with the case level data.
Thank you.
So just in looking at non-New York City, you'll see that 62% of the cases were resulting in a conviction or YO adjudication. And then if we fast forward to 2021, that was 21% last year, and then 14% so far this year. So just like New York City, we're seeing the non-favorable outcomes really decline. We're seeing the favorable outcomes really increase. It goes from 27% up to 60% outside New York City. And then lastly, we did the same type of analysis but looking at the proportion of cases that are resulting in confinement. So if you're a 16 or 17-year-old and you were arrested on a felony, how many of those kids received an outcome that resulted in a confinement or incarcerative outcome? So here, if we look at New York City, we're looking here at the orange, which is non-incarcerative outcomes. The orange is a non-confinement outcome. And then the blue is an incarcerative or outcome or confinement. So if you see in New York City in 2016 and 2017, you have between 14 and 16% of the cases are resulting in incarceration. And then we actually see that come down. It reaches a low of 7% in 2020, and then it increases in 2021 and 2022. So starting to see just a little bit of an increase here in the number of cases after kind of bottoming out in 2020, the number of cases that are receiving that incarcerative outcome. And then just once again, the orange and the blue is the total non-favorable, and we see those come down, we're seeing those come down from the chart. And then outside New York City, we have 27% of the cases were resulting in or of these arrests really were resulting in a incarcerative outcome. And then we see that come down in 2020, it was 13%. It increased in 2021, 19%, and then decreased in 2022, 15%. So a smaller proportion, we are seeing a smaller proportion of these 16 and 17-year-old felony cases, these are felonies, resulting in confinement. So just to sum up this section here, doing our pre-post analysis, what we are seeing is that most felonies are being diverted from the system. We're seeing fewer non-favorable outcomes. We're seeing more favorable outcomes for these felonies, and we're seeing less confinement.
So one of the things I'd say is that, Raise the Age in many ways has achieved its goals, and that we have successfully shrunk the system, but we didn't shrink it for everyone equally. And that's the great challenge that we have in trying to examine our practices and the application of laws, et cetera, to ensure a sense of fairness for everyone. And I think that's really the work ahead of us. So, I'm pleased to see that, and we started this in 2017, actually, with the planning, so it's been a long road. Nina knows that. And everyone around this table knows that. And we've done enormous work, and I think New York State should be very proud of the way it's implemented Raise the Age and removing particularly 16 and 17-year-olds from adult jails, which is something I think really important. But better outcomes generally in terms of shrinking the system, but not as well equally for everyone. So we have more work to do.
Would you say, and maybe this is a question for me as well, but how do we do on the flip side? Meaning, like, how do we do building resources and services and capacity for diversion purposes?
It's a great question. And every Monday morning at 9:30, Nina's people, LDSS, OCFS, and DCGS are on the phone with the Division of the Budget for getting Raise the Age plans approved. Yeah. And we have DCGS staff and OJRP and OPDF and OPCA reviewing those detailed plans. And ensuring that counties have the resources. On the probation side, it totals around $35 million, I think. One of the things I will say is this, and I'll just speak for probation, but I think the same is true of social services, is that we're not looking to cut budgets. What we're really doing in our staff and reviewing these plans is ensure that these counties have the resources available to have meaningful interventions with you. A great need around mental illness. As you know, we revised our probation regulations that require, and probation departments do it, every youth eligible for JD and PINS intake and adjustment is screened for mental illness so they can be evaluated. And we're using uniform tools, electronic access to those. Mental illness is a big issue. But mentoring, school-based services, alternatives to detention, including respite, intensive case management, predispositional supervision. We even developed a regulation to give guidance to probation departments around predispositional investigation, pretrial services rather. So, there's a lot of services that are being funded by New York State, and that's why we're achieving the increase, even with an older population, in increasing our adjustment rates, because without the services, you cannot be successful.
But I think this goes back to the point, because even though we're seeing less kids incarcerated and less kids in the system, if you look at the chart, the disparities haven't changed. It's kind of been even, right? Like even with all this, it's been even across the board. And I think even when we were talking about earlier, these proposals, right, in this this convening that we're talking about doing with healing and equity, and then launching the equity champions, I think it falls perfectly into this, because a lot of times when you go to these national conferences, you're looking at national numbers, which probably are very similar to New York, but it's still like in your mind, you're still not thinking about like, what does my state look like individually? And I think having something here in New York gives us an opportunity to look at New York specific, and then really have people in different sectors to be these champions of equity, so that these numbers, because it's great that we're reducing kids in the system, but we aren't reducing the disparity in the system. And that's really what we want to do, is be able to push that disparity being reduced in the system.
Perfectly said.
I also just wanted to close the loop on my initial ask. I think that in early conversations, OMI's not always at the table in raised age conversations, because like it's not our thing, right? But we have like been on the fringe, like waiting, right? Like, what is the impact of raise the age on the kids in New York State? And then, so, we've kind of been, the conversations have really been around, well, we don't exactly know, the full breadth of how much raise the age is really going to impact kind of the ripple effect outside of the juvenile justice and child welfare systems to impact other child serving systems. Do you feel as though, with what we've learned and what data we have, at least preliminarily, what kind of impact it does have, or what kind of needs are really coming to the surface that you're seeing trends around that would help to inform what other systems now can do to work in collaboration to address these needs that you've identified?
I can speak a little bit to that. I would say, first of all, that we can't underestimate the impact of COVID, right? That COVID hit 5 months after the full implementation of Raise the Age, right? So everything has to be seen through that lens, because everything stopped for almost a year in the communities. And we're seeing, and the gun violence increase, I think, is directly related to COVID. And I don't think we talk enough about the communities that lost a lot of family members and support to COVID, right? Certainly in New York City, the amount of people who died because of COVID was disproportionately in the same communities that we're seeing some of the gun violence in. But I think also the big quit, right? And the lack of human services providers, that the money is there, the plans are there. Is the workforce there? Is the big, everybody has that problem. So I would say that one of the weaknesses or biggest challenges for all of us to think about together is that transition age youth, right? The 16 to 21-year-olds that, you committed your crime when you were 16 or 17, but you're really still considered part of the youth justice system till 21. So how do we create the right approaches that meet the young people where they are developmentally, right? They're young adults, many of them, by the time they're finished with their court processes, right? They're 18, 19 years old. Do we have the right approaches that recognize the need for increased autonomy and challenge to them to become sort of the adults that they can be? I think that's a really big area for us to be looking at. I think the mental health impacts are huge. And we just don't have capacity.
And we don't either. I'll be completely blunt. We just recently, about 2-3 years ago, created a position and a bureau devoted to this. Nancy Hollander is our assistant commissioner for transition age youth. And, because we said we need a devoted focus on this because our system has a black hole. So if you look at the data of service utilization, there's a drop off at 18 and then a pickup at like 26 and then like nothing. And we're like, where are these young people going for care? And they're not. That's the problem. So absolutely, I think that those are great conversations to have. It's just helpful to know where like the connections are for further discussion because I don't think that we have had the opportunity. And again, we're just as impacted by COVID. We don't have the workforce, so we can plan, but whether we can execute is always the issue because we've been putting money out there and providers are like, I'd love to start that program you just gave me funding for, but I can't find the people to do the work. But it's good at least to have a pathway to maybe even just for prioritization and focus of how to get those at least high needs kids that are presenting with significant psychiatric needs into those programs that we're able to start through some of these funds.
And I would say housing is a huge challenge, an enormous challenge, particularly for young adults who are leaving carceral settings, right? Going back home may not be an option. So how do we create some supportive housing? Again, that is developmentally focused for people who spent a portion of their sort of late adolescence to young adulthood in institutional settings to come out and thrive. Housing is a huge problem everywhere, but those are some of our biggest challenges with supports, right? It's not just the apartment, but who can help that young person.
I do want to touch on the point that Nina made with respect to the COVID, which has been so disastrous because you look at, and I'm reading the case files now, you look at the fact that the schools were closed, and I'm not pointing the fingers at the schools. God knows they struggled, as did the courts and everyone with this problem. But the school was the workplace of the child. And for 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, those resources were not available, and these young people did not do well, and they dropped out of school. And school, they're trying to offer, the case I was reading last night, offer alternative schooling 2 to 3 hours, but it now conflicts with the mental health service that the youth need, so he can't participate in the service. At the same time, a lot of the elders who were the care providers of these youth, it was the grandparents also, were among the greatest populations hit by the COVID. Yep. So wipe them out. And furthermore, it wiped them out in communities, Black and brown communities to greater extent. So this was a cataclysmic event on the most neediest populations from so many different perspectives. And I think now we're seeing the results of that, including in the gun violence. And maybe that's the segue to where you want to go on.
That's right. I just wanted to, I don't know if anyone's seen this chart, and I know it's just on my phone, but the dark blue is the mental health provider shortage areas in our state. Pretty much the entire state. That's like almost the whole state.
Wow. Just keep the pen going.
So I just am echoing your point. This is meetings I'm in my area all the time. We have all these programs. We don't have staff to run them. So it's a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so I will move on to the last section here. We're going to take a look at firearm crimes and dive into the specifically the 16 and 17-year-old cases. But first, just take a look at this table, which is a big, ugly, horrible table, I know. But there's a few takeaways here I want people to walk away with. So this shows total felony arrests and then felony firearm arrests. So here we have New York City, here we have outside New York City, and we're looking at the different age groups. So 16 to 17, 18 to 24, 25 to 29, and 30 plus. And in both regions of the state, while we are seeing total felonies have decreased, so they're down almost 30% in New York City, down 19% outside New York City, we're seeing those firearm cases increase. So out in New York City, the firearm arrests are up by 14%, and then in outside New York City, they're up by almost 40%. So while we're seeing total felony arrests are down statewide, these felony firearm arrests are up. So this is a little bit of a friendlier graphic to look at. This shows in New York City, so we're looking at New York City here, arrests and then arrest rates by these different age groupings. So the blue line is the 16 to 17-year-olds, the red line is the 18 to 24-year-olds, the black line is 25 to 9, and then the purple line is 30 plus. So just looking at the arrest volume, you'll see that the 18 to 24-year-olds have the highest arrest volume in New York City. They also have the highest arrest rate in New York City. So allowing us to compare, the rate allows us to compare across the age groups. You can see that the 18 to 24-year-old has the highest rate, and then in terms of the 16 and 17-year-olds, they have the lowest volume. It's only a 2-year age span that we're looking at here, where in the other groupings we're looking at larger age spans. So it's not too surprising that we're seeing that they're the lowest volume, but they have the second highest rate of firearm arrests, and then followed by the 25 to 29, and then the 30 plus. So one thing I want to point out that I thought was kind of interesting is that these arrests, we started to see them go up between 2018 and 2019, kind of for each of these age groups, right? They're increasing a little bit, and then especially for the 18 to 24-year-olds, they really spike in 2020. People often talk about, the gun violence really spiking in 2020. It did. It certainly did a lot. However, we saw these arrests start to increase between 18 and 19. Outside New York City, it looks a bit different. You have the 30 plus population has the highest volume of firearm arrests, followed by the 18 to 24-year-olds, followed by the 25 to 29-year-olds, and then the 16 and 17-year-olds. But looking at the rate, which allows us to compare across these age groups, and is the 18 to 24-year-olds have the highest rate, followed by the 25 to 29, followed by the 16 to 17. So, it's certainly the 18 to 24-year-olds have the highest firearm arrest rate in the state. And you can see how the 16 and 17-year-olds kind of play into that, where they fall. So then just taking a look at the cases, we're on slide 30 here. We're looking at 16 and 17-year-old felony firearm cases. So looking at youth part data, probation intake, and then family court petition data. You see, especially between 2020, we see an increase in the number of youth part cases disposed. We see at probation, the number of probation cases closed increase between 2020 and 2021. So we're seeing more firearm cases for 16 and 17-year-olds. We'll probably be in youth part and probation in 2022, we'll probably be at similar levels that we were last year. At family court, we'll probably see a higher number of firearm cases in family court, just because there was 141 in the first 6 months of 2022. So we're seeing these increasing kind of at each case processing point. And then let's take a look at what's happening to these cases at each case processing point. So it's pretty interesting. In youth part in New York City, we are seeing an increase in the number of convictions and YO adjudications for these firearm crimes. So, we're seeing fewer removals. They're going, in 2020, it was 89%. In 2019, it was 88%. And we're seeing so far this year, that was down to 80%. So fewer of these firearm cases are being removed from youth part, more are resulting in the conviction or YO adjudication.
I have a question. Is there any way to know if these are second, third, fourth offenses of the same youth?
I will talk about that when I'm done. I do want to talk about kind of what we are trying to do to do that, because that is the question. That is one of the main questions that we are getting. And then at probation, they are referring all of these cases to Corp Counsel, all these cases to the prosecutor. They really do not adjust any of these firearm cases in New York City. And then one thing I thought was interesting here at family court is that we've seen a little bit of a flip in the last year and a half or so. So last year in 2021, you had over 50%, 54% of these firearm cases got the favorable outcome, and then 46, under half, received a JD finding. So what we are seeing now so far this year is only 32% of these family court petitions are getting a favorable finding, and then almost 2/3 are receiving the JD finding. So more kids, there's harsher outcomes for the kids occurring, and we'll see kind of how that plays out this year. And then looking at outside New York City, we have you see those youth part firearm cases increase. You see the probation intakes closed increase. I do just want to point out that these are very small numbers, right? Like 106, 76 cases. There was a 30 number increase between 2020 and 2021. There's not very many of these, right? And when we look at how many probation intakes there are total. So this is a small proportion of the kids that are going through probation are firearms.
It's about 1%.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a huge number, even though we are seeing that increase. And then we did see the increase at family court as well, and kind of at each case process point at youth part, probation, and family court, we're probably going to see a similar increase in similar numbers in 2022. And then what's happening to these cases, what's happening to these firearm cases, you can outside the city. So just like in the city, we are seeing the convictions and adjudications increase quite a bit. It was 18% in 2020. It's now up to 30% so far this year. So, the system is there are harsher outcomes for the youth that are going through with these charges. And then at the same time, of course, we would see fewer removals to family court or probation because more are resulting in the conviction in youth part. And then looking at those that are referred to presentment, we have actually the number at probation outside New York City, you have fewer of these firearm cases are being referred to presentment, and more cases are being adjusted. So, and so I may be reading into this a little bit, but more of the cases are staying up in youth part than coming down, and at the same time, they're maybe able to adjust the cases that are going to probation. And, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. I keep having questions, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
But is there any distinction between possession and use? So to me, that's a major distinction in these cases. I think, for example, it's much more likely that a possession case is going to be removed to family court versus a use case, like in a robbery or something. Is there a way to understand?
Yeah, so we do get the charge level data, so we can see, was it a firearm possession case, or was it a use, or like if they pointed the firearm, so we can see the differences.
But in terms of understanding this data, are you able to enlighten us a little bit about what this represents in terms of possession versus use?
So it includes both. So this is a firearm indicator. So it's what we receive at DCJS is when there is an arrest made, there's a charge entered by the police, and then that charge is indicators kind of developed, and it's if a firearm is part of the element of the crime. So it's not like we have a data element that's like this person had a gun. Like we have to look at the charge and say that the firearm was part of the element of the PL that was charged. And so these are firearm crimes as indicated by the penal law. So, but we could see we can see the specific charges.
Okay, I just think before we draw any conclusions, that's a really important factor. Mm-hmm. If there's a gun in a car and there's 5 people in the car and they're all charged with possession, that's very different from somebody pointing a gun to hold somebody up.
Yeah.
And so I think if we're going to start drawing conclusions and making decisions around this data, that we need to really drill down a little more.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Yeah, I expect probably some of those adjustments on probation of those types of possession cases, Judge, where, a court might say, well, there was a gun in the car, but it was 5 people. But otherwise, a pointing or displaying or using as part of a robbery is not going to be an adjusted case.
Well, more than that, I think whether or not it's removed at all is that to me, that's a major factor. As somebody who's a decision maker, like that's a distinction I draw. I am much more likely to remove cases that are possession cases, either to adjustment or to family court, than I am a use case. And so I just assume that we're going to be using this data to make decisions, because guns is a huge issue for our state. And so I just want to be careful about that. And I guess I would request more information about that distinction as we proceed.
Yeah, and anyone could like email us and say, we want to see kind of removals by charge level, and we would provide it kind of as a statistical request. So we could certainly break that out by the different charge types.
Thank you.
All right, I think that is it. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to raise my hand, but I guess I can't see if Bob is still with us, but I think it's important. I would ask you, Bob, to comment on this. That I think, regardless of what the charges are or how we feel about them, I think kind of the tenets of the raise the age are still important, right? And that is that, these kids of a certain age, can be, redirected, can be, kept out of the system. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right, Commissioner. And, I think the charts on the shrinkage demonstrate that. For me, one of the axioms of having been a former corrections administrator, and I'm sure Alan feels the same way, is that we had 16 and 17-year-olds. And I remember when we went to Long Island as part of our regional presentations, that at the time there were 450 kids, 16 and 17-year-olds in adult jails. It was an enormous problem. So we removed those, and that's pretty good. We shrunk the system and seeing more favorable outcomes. But the problem is we didn't shrink it for everybody. Right. We did not shrink it for everybody. We don't have the same positive outcomes for Black and brown kids as we do for white kids. And there's a series, and it doesn't happen by mistake. There's policies and decisions that are made along the way that influence outcomes. And I think the great challenge to us is how we use the data to tell a story and challenge people to look at their own data. And what I was saying earlier is we never had that ability before, and now we do. Now we do. We have the data, and that's what DCGS is doing. And so is OCFS, to their credit, is we are putting the data out there in New York State for all to see. So all policymakers, whether it's police, prosecutor, defense counsel, judiciary, probation, can all see the disparity, see the data, and challenge ourselves. Some of the work we're doing on behalf of DCGS is replicating a blinding process at intake and adjustment. Monroe County has such a system. We're now expanding that to Westchester County, Onondaga County. So even after probation has looked at a case, decided that it's either adjustable, not adjustable, and a non-adjustable case, to blind that case and send it to a review committee where race, ethnicity, age, and even neighborhood residence is redacted so as to eliminate considerations with respect to race. So we're trying to do those things in change practice. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Yes, I think it does. Thank you.
I think we've seen a lot of that data today. It's the first time I've seen so much of it in one study.
Oh,
it really shows.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Either I'm sorry or I'm happy. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. We talked about it, but this time I've really seen it stick out like that.
And earlier we talked about the conference, and we talked about champions and trying to put in place a structure. I think that's what the argument was. How do we benefit and make this larger than just a conference? And we talked about champions, which is a great idea. But what I would say is maybe as part of that planning process, we need to think about a structure where the champions convene decision makers in the jurisdictions and share the data with them. So the job of the champion is to share the data and convene the groups to look at the data. And Judge, I got to tell you, in my experience in public safety over the years, the one entity that gets the attention of everyone is when the judge says to show up. We can organize all types of meetings, champions, et cetera, but when a judge says that there's a meeting in my chamber at 8:30 on the fourth Wednesday to look at the data, people show up. So
It's true.
I would say that, the judges could really be effective.
But I just learned today from Emily, prior to this meeting, that there is county-specific data that's available. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So maybe one of the things that has to be done is to alert the judiciary
Yes.
that this data is available, and then maybe they would convene meetings. Certainly now that I know that, and our stakeholders meet every month anyway.
Sure.
So I can just bring it to our ordinary meeting, but some counties don't do that. So I think that that's just really important for us to understand that it's available, because I didn't know that till today.
Yes. Yeah, and we would be happy to do kind of a walkthrough of what we post on our website on all the system data that we have. And a lot of it, most of it is by race ethnicity. So.
But I also think we need to look at, like, before they get to probation, right? We're talking about the disparities when they get to probation, right? There's arrests that happens there's a lot of disparity in that, right? So I think, being able, once again, going back to this conference idea, is that law enforcement has to be at the table too, right? Because there are things that aren't arrestable offense that kids of color get arrested for. And now they start the process, and now that's where we start seeing a lot of the disparities. So I want us to be thinking that too, larger than just probation or court. We need to start thinking about law enforcement and when it really starts, when they first have that introduction to the system, which starts with an arrest.
I think you're right, Dan, and I think schools too.
Mm-hmm. Suspensions and things like, yes.
School districts handle disciplinary matters, which turn into delinquency matters differently across the board.
I may have missed this, but you had a slide that was non-favorable, favorable outcomes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Could you break those down by race?
Yeah, yes, and so we could, yes. And we do post all the disposition data on our website by race and ethnicity. So you could go up there and see, of all the youth part cases, this is the percentage for each race category that got removed. This is how many resulted in a conviction or a YO adjudication. So we post a lot of that on our website. I didn't show it all here today, but we do have it available.
Can you query that using on the website, just like that?
Yeah,
Tableau?
It's not Tableau. We kind of have it in a lot of different formats. We are working on Tableau, but you could go. There's a lot of Excel documents out there that you can, and we show most of the data by county, so you could look and see. And if there wasn't something there by county, we could run it for you kind of upon request. So I think the youth part data might be shown by New York City, non-New York City, but we could run it for Erie County and show it by the charges, for example. Or we could run it for Westchester County, so counties can see their own specific data. And that's really if they want to dig in. Like, what we see in the data is that so many of those cases are being removed to probation or family court, and all that data is up there by county, by race. So you can see, at probation how many cases are getting adjusted by race. You can see how many are being referred. You can see how many JD petitions there are by race, and the findings by race for every county. So maybe a demo of our website for one of the meetings.
I think that would be very helpful. And a methodology to send it to all of the counties at some decision-making level, whether that's the judge or I don't know exactly, but so that they can understand that, and people aren't going to spend the time necessarily to figure it out. But then if it's clear, and then maybe they would convene, we asked them maybe to convene meetings or to take a look at that data, maybe they would.
Emily, thank you. We appreciate it. I think this was very helpful. And really appreciate it. And Eddie, I see that you're back. I think you always set me up for these things. You come back at the very end here. I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I know we do have another item on the agenda, but I really do want to be able to give it the time that it deserves. And I know if we start talking about the regional youth justice teams and thinking about restructuring, I don't think we have enough time in this meeting as this ends at 1 o'clock, and so we can bring that up again. But I do want to talk about, like, when we're talking about next steps. As you guys know, we're coming to the end of our 3-year plan, and it's time to start planning for our next 3-year plan, which is always fun. So I just want us to start thinking as a group, as a JAG, like, what is that going to look like? What are going to be some of the things that we're thinking about doing? And we will be working with you guys to really start, looking at what's that's going to look like, how it's going to look, and what it's going to be moving forward. Eddie, I don't know if you want to add to it. You're more than welcome here to have your job back.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry, everyone. I've been listening in and watching, and Damon, I would not want to take away from the rhythm that you have carried on for this meeting, and the pleasure that it's been to hear your melodic voice leading this meeting. So I will pass it back to you. But other than saying that, I agree in terms of it's, and I think it was Trista who kind of spurred us, remind us again, we gotta start planning forward in terms of our next 3-year plan. Even though I think we almost feel as if we're just getting started with the current 3-year plan, the momentum that we actually have. But I think we want to stay ahead of sort of staying in, not only staying on pace with what we have and planning for the next one, but also making sure that we're meeting with the guidelines. That the statute that we have to maintain by in terms of making sure we have our 3-year sort of goals set. So and I think our intention was to kind of put it into the water stream of conversation that we need to define very soon what's going to be the pathway in which we're going to follow in terms of how we want to do the strategic plan. For those who've been on for a while, like myself and Bob and others, and and Sheila, and we've seen different iterations in terms of how the strategic planning process has gone, and I think we want to sort of revisit what's going to be best suited for us to get to the next strategic plan. So with that, I'll pause and kick it back to you, Damon.
All right. If anybody has any questions or comments before we close out the meeting, do I?
Just one thing,
Yes.
a little bit of, I know before COVID, we did like a 1 day, I think it was like a 1 day where we like came as a groups, and I know you still trying to do it with the Zoom as well, but I'm a person who likes to do things in person rather than online. Just as you guys are getting ready to think about how is it going to gather people, can that be put into consideration, and will we actually spend not just 2 to 3 hours, but a little bit more to actually dive into these conversations?
Yeah, I think so. I think everything's on the table. I think what we didn't want to do was come in the game late and be scrambling to get it done, right? Like, I think we want to start having these conversations early so that, we can come up with, we have a whole lot of different viewpoints and come out with the best way that, it's going to work for the strategic plan, or how we want to do the planning for the strategic plan. So I think that is definitely, everything's on the table.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And with that, can I get a motion to close the meeting? Meredith? Can I get somebody to second the motion then? There we go. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate everything that you guys are doing. And have a great holiday, guys.